Okay, so we have the last presentation today. And you know this guy probably.
Oh, it works.
This is the best.
One second. Really bad.
But you still have a lot of time.
I know.
Okay, good luck. Reggie, the stage is yours.
Okay, let's get started. Hi everyone. I have a tendency to drift away, so if that happens, just ping me. And you can ask questions whenever you want. I do some security stuff at my daily work. I do open source. And the funny thing is I look a lot at open source, which I think gives me an interesting perspective on things. I mostly look at Ruby gems and NPM. Yeah, I was better. So when I started making this presentation, I thought I would try to convince you that doing open source is fun, and that it's doable, and that you can have friends because of it. And that it's actually, you can merge building new cool stuff with making them maintainable. But then 2 days ago, a guy complained, and I had a bug, like, typical like stuff. I retry, I refresh, and I still see the error, right? Which kind of made me start, like, it got me thinking whether I should talk about it. So I figured out that if you owe them nothing because it's open source, you'll be happy. So if you need to take anything out of this talk, then like keep in mind that if you're doing open source, you owe nothing to anyone. I don't want to call it free labor, but like, yeah, pretty much. I'm just gonna talk about making gems, and I'm making a lot of mistakes because this talk had like 160 slides of me explaining how I fuck things up and how people open a lot of issues. And this got me thinking that maybe there's a better way to do some of this stuff. But first I'm gonna tell you how I started with gems. So I just had my own needs, I had stupid ideas, and when you have stupid ideas, you come up with really stupid solutions. And I never had any plans to make anything that would be popular. I was making gems and putting comments in Polish, Great developer experience, like the best you can have, like during the old times, all of the comments in Ruby were in Japanese, so I thought, yeah, I'm gonna do the same with Polish. Yeah, some still are. So there's this one guy in Japan, Joker, that is responsible for maintaining Ruby docs. And I asked him, like, listen, why is like socket management in Linux not documented in Ruby, not documented in English, and only in Japanese? And he started to laugh at it. He was like, it's not even documented in Japanese. And I needed that, out of all of my gems that I built, this one is my favorite. 100,000 downloads, and it's empty. It's literally empty. There's nothing in it. I have this tendency that whenever I attend a conference, by the way, I'm just not gonna go through all this stuff probably. I have this tendency whenever people announce something like solid Q, mission control, right? I just go and pick the names, the Ruby gems, for myself. Like, why not? They didn't book it. So, like, Google didn't book this one. They should have. Because developers are lazy. So they see a GitHub name like that, and they just gem install it, Put it in bucket. I have 260 gems like that. But this one is my favorite. I also have mission control, by the way. And I think I had stolen Q as well, but I gave it away or something. I know Luis from 37 Signals picked me like, dude, it would be really nice if you could give it back. So I did. I also built a gem for this. Do you know that? So it's a Polish ICQ from like 15, 20 years ago. And I was building agents before it was hot. And I wanted my users of my really shitty website to be able to send me messages through Gadu Gadu. So I found someone's master thesis on hacking the API in C, and I implemented it in Ruby. And you'll be surprised when people started complaining of my open source, you know? Like I sent a message and it was not delivered. Which is something, by the way, I deal on a daily basis now. But I get to that later. And then, like, I built this funny framework, and I built it because I'm lazy. I work with a lot of people, and none of us knew Kafka, hype-driven development, you know, 2014. But my really good friend came to me, Maciej, there's this really good technology, it's gonna solve all of our problems, and if not all of them, then at least one. It certainly didn't solve my problems, but we had some people, and when you build gems, they start simple, usually, then they get more complex. And this is something that happened to me. But I picked this road because I was tired of explaining people how to build like process-based gems. Rosa knows what I'm talking about. Like you need to deal with signals, with recoveries, with connections, connection pooling, blah, blah, blah. You know, it's like a lot of stuff you have to explain to people, and I didn't want to. So I wrote gems to abstract all of it away. And some people started to use it. I don't know why. And when I look at gems and applications, I see that they're getting more and more complex. Yeah, we need to start thinking about stuff. I know it's like YOLO development open source, but if you want to build something and make it solid, you sometimes need to think. Same applies to building gems or any other libraries. I picked some projects just for fun to see how big they are, how they're growing. They obviously my stuff sidekick, you know, like sidekick. Avo. Solid Q. You're just getting started, you know, like you're gonna have a hockey stick growth. That's my prediction. If you think about gems, like small boxes that we use to compose software, right? We put a lot of them together, we hope they're gonna work. Not all of them are of exceptional quality, but they mostly kind of work, you know? They're like, yeah-ish. But when you look at the open source space of Ruby, and I do it on a daily basis, you can see a lot of influence of Rails on how people build their gems. You see people that are really cautious with how they manage dependencies and the YOLO happy people. And I think I've identified some of the things that make gem maintenance a bit easier with Rails. You know, it's a good framework. It's like, I like it. I certainly like it. I've been doing a lot of Rails. I've built some pretty decent software with it. One thing that Rails makes super easy, and I'm not talking about like an application development, I'm talking about gem development. It makes it so easy to build gems with UIs, and I'm gonna spend the remaining 22 minutes convincing you not to use it. So keep that in mind. It makes life so much easier. But it also creates its own problems. Like Rails is a really big ecosystem of libraries. If you roll it in as your dependency, it means it becomes transitive dependency of someone else through your libraries, unless they use it like directly, right? If you think about providing gem with generic functionalities, it limits your scope, and it makes it complex to test stuff. Because like Rails at least 6, 7, 7.1, 8.0 or master, right? So yeah, a lot of testing, and then Ruby versions get a really decent and long-running test suite. So my general advice is to make your libraries work with Rails, cooperate with them, but make them run and operate beyond Rails. So whether you have users that want to use Rails with it or not, they will have a chance to do it. Yeah, and actually making things work with Rails isn't that hard. There's Railty, you can just plug things. You can detect that there's Rails happening, so you can easily connect your stuff. You can use Rails logger and other things to like auto-configure, and you can remap your concepts. And what I mean by that is you don't have to use nothing from Active Super and like all of those amazing monkey punching libraries. But you can make your software in such a way that people that use certain libraries from Rails, here Active Super notification, right, can just remap whatever you're doing to their language, the Rails language. And if you do it, you get a really seamless integration. Another thing with building gems is dependency management, and I could make a really long talk about only that. We're still happy compared to other registries, but it's not perfect. So keep in mind that every single dependency, this applies to applications as well, is a liability. If you add something to your application, well, it's good to keep an eye on it, you know, breaking changes, security problems, blah, 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 and so on. It kind of makes things problematic. But if you're building a gem, you're a man in the middle. You're not the last person that is going to work with it. So your constraints of your dependencies like, influence the end resolution of all of the gems in the applications. And that can have really severe consequences, to which I'm going to get later. That's me a few years ago, pretty much that. Like my approach was always, I'm too lazy to do stuff, so I'm just gonna add gems that are gonna do all of the stuff for me. Then I started getting a lot of, oh, Piotr Stonica. Oh, nice. Yeah, a lot of, oh, Luis, there, 37 signals. A lot of
That's yours.
problems. It got me, I know, because I opened it, but someone pinged me. It got me thinking, you know, like, maybe I'm doing something wrong. Oh, I could blame it on the ecosystem, but I thought for like 5 minutes and just remove all gems. Like, why not? Why not? I had like 58 dependencies in my ecosystem. I reduced it to 9 or 10. I was really happy, you know. It's like 83% done. Now everything is gonna be great. So I'd only, like, those are the most critical ones. Yeah. It's like, yeah. Fuck! Fuck! Like fuck! Karawka. Fails. Cannot run. Zeitwerk. Well, actually, David fixed it because it turned out it was a boundary bug, you know. But the problem is, it was my software that was crashing, so people would blame me, not him. What the fuck? You know? But it got fixed by David. I put it in our docs, just update bundler, everything's gonna work. 4 months ago, fucking Tor. You know, it's been in Rails since like forever. It was super stable. I use only public APIs. One day, a couple months ago, it just stopped working. You know? So, Rafael released it, and I was like, oh, that's bad. And when something like this happens, things get really interesting. Because you can do a few things. That's me. You can fix it. You can try to fix it, right? Like either in Tor, or you can monkeypot. You can try making it work, right? You can just skip the library, or you can pretend. You can start ignoring it. Like you can issue recommendations to users to lock Tor to the previous version, and pretend it never happened. But it's fine. It's not a library that would have like a lot of security issues. But imagine that it would happen to Puma, right? So Puma, from time to time, has CDEs, vulnerabilities. And here is me telling you, hey, you can either get secure Puma and no Karafka, or you can get Karafka and buggy Puma. I don't think people will be happy with that, and I owe no one nothing, right? Yeah. But still. Side ditch stuff. Like, I started removing stuff. I didn't remove side verb. No more bugs. You promised. But you know, I was kind of like, okay, 3,500 lines of code. I replaced it with 100. My use case, my own use case, right? I used opt parser and I broke some minor API of mine, but got rid of a dependency. God, I did this with the try validation. Oh, that was heavy. You know, it's like, you don't have to deal with so many dependencies. If your use case is extremely small, it's absolutely not worth taking any heavy libraries because it becomes your liability. And then, open source, but still, it becomes liability of people that rely on your software. God, I got so many problems with the dry ecosystem. Like, one issue that I got was, we're using Karafka, everything was fine, but now Rails console doesn't work. Dry initializer broke. But they blamed me, you know, because I was bringing it to their system. They didn't use it outside of my open source, so they blamed me. Let's put aside the supply chain, and maybe going to get back to it later. There are a few interesting things you can do with your libraries. You can YOLO, which I do a lot, like a lot. But then I kind of try to step back and look how I can design stuff to make it slightly better. And how can I design it in a way that would allow me to further extend what I'm adding to my open source gems. And until recently, I didn't know it's called layered architecture. Big words, there are probably books about that. And another one, component-based architecture. If there aren't books about this, someone should write them. So this is easy. This is just onion, you know. You just depend on stuff below, and you don't mix stuff. Easy as that. And in my ecosystem, that's quite simple. There's a C driver, a low-level Ruby driver that I own, right? That is like mapping the C stuff. Nothing more, the same functionalities, map, done. There's some core with like instrumentation library stuff I use here, and on top of that, there's like web UI. You're like, we're done. Layered architecture 1.0 certified. Another thing that I didn't do for a really long time is building components. So I would refer all of those classes directly in my open source, and I would be happy until I started noticing that you may want to replace stuff, right? You have some of the things that are, some of the components that are making some logic, and maybe you want to have a different logic for some sort of use cases, or in my case, paid offering, right? I can always say, oh, there's a paid version of something and it's faster, it's better. It is. But yeah, let's put that aside. I just, you know, when I use sidetrack and I load stuff, I detect, okay, you paid me, so I'm just going to give you those shiny features. It's so much better than what I used to do previously, which would be monkey patching, and monkey patching. Yeah, another thing is release cycles of software. That's a really complex topic. You need to understand that, and you need to start planning releases, and that's really important. Backwards compatibility is something really important, and iterative feature development, because none of the things you will come up will ever make people happy. Oh yeah, that's also another topic, but we're gonna get to that in a second. and dogs. Dogs? Yeah. Oh, dogs and examples. Look. Well, okay, if you have two things to take out of this presentation, it's like don't use jams. Don't use jams. Yeah. That would be that. When you're building libraries, they're not the final product for your users. And that has some implications to how they think about your software. So they are, well, we could discuss that gems are applications or not, but from the perspective of the end user, they are like, you know, packages. What that means is they're not going to update that. And I hate that one. I was making slides, I put here 1 to 2 years, right? It's like, okay, adoption rate. And then this guy picks me from Japan. Hi, I joined a company, I'm investigating a case that happened 9 months ago, we lost an event. But that's serious stuff, you know. You don't want to do that. You don't want to lose jobs. You want your jobs to be solid. But you also want your events to be solid. So I asked him, hey, like, okay, that sounds bad. What version are you on? I was like, oh yeah, the one from 4 years ago. And then, fuck. And I like typed that. And he was like, I'm really sorry, I just joined this company. Do you have any advice? Upgrade it. But seriously, it's like, what can I do? Like, good luck finding that something I fixed down the road. But the funny thing is, you can make users update if you create incentives or bugs. Right? And the best is to do both. Like, once in a while, if you create a bug, you get to know people. Right? They open issues. They ping you on Slack. Yeah, so you get friends. Open source community. And yeah, features, they work worse than bugs. Really. Like, you can have a ratio of like 2 bugs to 1 feature, and it's gonna be fine. Oh god, this one. Like, Ruby 3.3, some nice features, and I'm stuck with 2.7. So, 5 more months. But it is critical for people, you know? People don't update Ruby that fast. Like, I get complaints that I'm not providing software for 2.4. So, yeah, it's like kind of treat it seriously. Updating is a friction for developers. They need to update, they need to look at the CI, someone needs to approve a pull request, and they need to deploy. But they don't want to do it. However good your gem is with backwards compatibility, however you tested it, it's still gonna fucking crash. You know? Because people have different use cases, and then they monkey patch your software in ways you never thought about, and they use APIs that are not public because they are nice. And this is what happened to me a few days ago. Yeah. So actually, this slide doesn't matter. Whatever you do, there's gonna complain, and even if you don't break official APIs, they will complain that you broke the send private APIs. Whatever you do, features are not gonna be perfect. But if you accept that, and if you try to design them for extendability, it makes everyone less miserable, I guess. So one thing I really like with public APIs I expose is using keyword arguments. Because I can add more of them, they're like order independent. I don't have to worry, right? I could even keep some of the settings, even if I don't need them, and issue warnings. And I can expand this, right? And I do a lot of it. I build a feature, I check if it sticks. I wait 2 years, as you noticed, to get like the release cycle, a fast release cycle. And then I build more features. When I do it, I end up with this challenge, let's not call it a problem, that public, private, and protected doesn't work. Why? Because I have public methods that I want to use But I don't want my users to use my public methods that I use, because I use them for something and it is not part of the official API. And then I thought about it and I was like, okay, how the big guys do it? So I looked at Hanami and, it's like API public, API private, but the problem is developers have to read this. Right? Not gonna work. So I went like Rails, underscore, but that's Ruby, not Python. So I didn't like that because it would force me to think. I would like have to think. Oh, is it supposed to be a public API or should I use an underscore? This method is not working. Yesterday I moved it to a private public with an underscore. Not me. So I did solid docs. I went with this rather simple assumption. Not documented, fuck you. Really, it's like that simple. If you're doing something I never documented, well, your problem. But it creates another problem for me. So my docs has to be usable. They have to be credible, findable, useful, valuable, accessible, and desirable. And the last one is really funny, because when I did not have enough docs, people would ask me to write them. But now I have a lot of docs, and people tell me they don't read them because there's too much reading. And they ask me, so what am I supposed to do? But by the way, there's a really good book about developer experience, and it's free. So I'm also giving away a book, you see, for free. And I'm giving it to everyone, and he gave it only to one guy. Okay, so. Yeah. About the docs, keep in mind they're not Googleable unless you have at least 500 stars. GitHub would put no index on your docs, meaning if people Google, they will not find it. That's why I host docs on my side and just mirror them in GitHub, because I don't know what they're gonna do with it. So, yeah, UIs. Oh, building UIs. Oh, that's a big topic for gems. There are gems with UIs, a lot of them. Mostly Rails, because it's amazing. Don't do it. I spent a lot of time thinking, how should I build my UI? And I decided not to do what this guy did, because he did amazing work building everything from scratch, crafting his own HTTP headers. Yeah, we've heard that today. He will still do it. I just took it all down, because Jeremy Evans is awesome. But when you have a software that is providing multi-process capabilities, meaning it runs in Puma, it runs its own process or something, things become really funny. Because people tamper your data. They play with it, they do weird migrations you never thought about, they don't read docs, and they don't read upgrade guides. And they even deploy things partially. Like I deployed this Puma with new version of Kafka 2 days ago, and it doesn't work with this old version that I have running in my servers. Help. I think I figured it out. So I just have a schema of data. I don't have a database, right? I store data in Kafka, and I made it to work as a key value store, which is quite interesting by itself. But I have a schema, right? And if you have schema, you can use pam-param, and then you have things like Rails migrations in few lines of code. And what I do with it, I detect the schema when the process is running, and I migrate the data in real time, right? So I have those Kafka topics that I never change. They keep the JSON data, and I just migrate data in flight. And this is an amazing thing if you have states in a UI, and you don't own the database, and you don't have any access to it. I'm really proud of it, because it's simple, elegant, and it works. Oh yeah, now let's skip this one, because we had like 2 minutes. Testing is, you test, right? Do it a lot. But what is cool is tests can be a docs. It's like a lot of tests, a lot of them, like a lot of them. But they always describe use cases. And when people ask me about something and I have no idea how my stuff will behave, I just write a test. And only 23% of my code is not tests. All of it is like tests, right? I say that I could recreate my framework from my tests, but I wouldn't be able at this stage to recreate my tests from my framework. No way. I also run all of this to make sure things work. And only then things usually work, which is really crazy because if you have open dependencies, things may work today, but unless you have Java locks, right? But they're not going to work tomorrow. Summary, exactly on time. Open source software is fun, as you noticed. But it is actually super interesting. And you know why? Because you get so many use cases of people and their businesses that you would have no chance to ever encounter in your life when working for a company. You would like literally have to switch jobs every 2 weeks. And then you wouldn't have enough time. But people will give you weird use cases, weird ideas, and weird complaints. But you accumulate a lot of collective knowledge because of that. And this allows you to make your software much better and much more interesting. And that's all. Please give me a star on GitHub. Because the more stars you have, the more stars you have. So yeah. I don't think we have time for extras, right? We have? Oh, I have 2 more slides. Oh. So I've been thinking a lot about bringing telemetry to Kafka, and you cannot basically. Like, no one ever will agree, and you need to do it opt-in, and then no one will opt-in if you do it opt-out. You get a huge shitstorm on Hacker News. Your gens will never be used in really big companies if you have telemetry, or if you do something really like weird, right? Because due diligence. And if you decide to provide some sort of a commercial services around it, like support, if you send data out of their data centers, even if it's anonymized and so on, the due diligence is going to be hell. If you don't do it, you just put everywhere, not applicable, not applicable, not applicable. I never send any data, not applicable, not applicable. I'm not a data processor according to GDPR, blah, 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 blah. Done. Right? Yeah, so unfortunately, you need to collect users' feedback, but we talked about it, make errors, you get feedback. It's really important if your libraries catch up to think about licensing. And it could be a subject of its own, but licensing is complex. Yeah. If you pick a wrong license and go with it, it's going to be really hard for you to relicense. So it took me, when I relicensed Kafka from MIT to LGPL, it took me over 6 months because I had to pick every single significant contributor and ask them for written permission to relicense their code, right? So I'd send this message, hey, it's Maciej, 6 years ago, you've committed 12 lines of code that I now either have to extract and mark as MIT in my LGPL, or would you be willing to give me a written consent to relicense that to another open source license, which is an LGPL? And after like 6 months after sending the last email, I got an answer like, what the fuck, do whatever you want with it. Yeah, thank you, that's a written consent, right? But if I wouldn't do it, I would not be able, and it would create a big problem for me. So I recommend to anyone just setting up a contributor level license agreement. This is something that when you submit a pull request in open source, like a lot of Apache projects, it gives me a message. Thanks for the contribution. No one will look at it until you sign the license agreement. This license agreement basically gives the company or whoever owns the software rights to relicense, to do whatever they want with it, including closing the source codes, right? To avoid any type of legal challenges. So keep that in mind. If you're just the only developer, things should be easier. You can always relicense your code, but you may not be able to relicense contributions. And I think it was a problem in Linux a few years ago, exactly the same. Yeah, that's all. Thank you. Any questions? Okay, I'm gonna be. Oh, yeah, there's a question. I'm gonna be at the after party, so you can ask me questions then.
Thank you for your time. So, just two connected questions. What are pros and cons of having the game version 9001?
Yeah.
And the second one,
Oh god.
what is better, to have cool name or the huge game version?
So the first question was, as you heard, why not 9001? So this is related to a boundary bug. A boundary bug related to something called dependency confusion. I don't know if you've heard about it. So dependency confusion made all bundler versions think that the source for a gem, if you had multiple sources, like you had, the Ruby gems and a private gem server, if there would be a name collision, 9001 would always pick mine. So bundler was like, oh wow, I have this private gem with a name XYZ, and there's a gem on Ruby gems, XYZ 9001. Oh, nice. I'm gonna take it. And yeah, that was actually a really big problem, because it was affecting NPM, it was affecting other registries. It's so fun, so much fun. So yeah, I have a lot of gems with this version. It doesn't have to be 9001, it just has to be really big. So 10,000 is gonna do it as well. I could make a different talk about funny behaviors of bundler, but yeah. And the second question was about funny name, right? Interesting name.
What is better, to have cool name or the bigger version?
Like, what do you mean by cool name?
Like the one you have, which is empty, but almost 100.
No. It's a different thing. It's again related to supply chain, and I do a lot of supply chain work in few registries. Plus, I do some supply chain work in Hugging Face. But it's not about the cool name. It's about developers not reading anything. Because what they see on GitHub, like you have GitHub/whatever, they're just gonna put it gem whatever, right? There's no ownership check there. And what I do is, like, I find cases like this, and I just take names, right? When David announced Solid Q and a few other things, I was sitting with my laptop. When he released a few years ago his gem, same stuff, right? There were some private gems you guys have. They were not taken by 37 signals, so they could be taken by someone. And it sounds fun, right? But it's not for fun, it's for security. This is why I do it. Because dependency resolution with multiple sources is extremely complex. Especially if you have transitive dependencies that round back to open source. So you can have a private registry with a private package that has public registry dependencies, right? And I'm pretty sure there is still dead bodies in the closet, edge cases and problems that will affect how the resolution goes. I think we patched all of the problems we know about in bundler. But you never know, right? That's why some of the companies, like Shopify does this, for example, whenever they have a private gem, they just block the name. If the name is taken as a public, I don't think they're going to pick it as a name for a gem, right? Just because we don't have namespaces in Ruby gems. It's under development, so it's like kind of a big problem. Even if you have namespaces, developers do not read anything. Namespaces didn't fix stuff in NPM. I wouldn't say they made it worse. They didn't fix it. So I don't believe they're going to fix this particular security problem. They may fix other problems, but they're not going to fix this one. So yeah, you can check out. I have a lot of gems. There are many more to be taken. Like, there are security researchers and malicious actors scanning GitHub to find names of gems that are, for example, abandoned, or I changed it in bundler when you do, like, I don't remember the command, gem new something, when you generate a gem, it would give you a readme, and this readme would have gem, gem, like recommendation how to install this gem, it would be gem install something or add it to your gem file log, right? So I changed it to put like capitalized warning. Please fill it only when you took the name on Ruby gems. Because a lot of gems would have this recommendation to install it from Ruby gems without taking the name. So it was pretty easy to scan GitHub to find all of those names and claim them for yourself, right? And you can claim them for security reasons, for positive security reasons, for security research, bounty hunting, or to do something bad. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, that's all. See you at the after party.